So how important is it to have a great IQ? Let's go down memory lane. The man with the greatest IQ of all time was a man called William J. Sidis. He had an IQ of between 250 to 300. He became a Harvard professor at the age of 16. But when you look at his life, you see that he never really accomplished anything significant outside his academic prowess. In fact, after a while, he began living from place to place. He became like a nomad. He adopted libertarian views, and his end was quite shameful compared to the kind of intelligence that he had. But let's go through a couple of other people. Garry Kasparov, the greatest chess player of all time, has an IQ of 190. Great, impressive. Great man. We can look at Christopher Hirata, professor at Ohio State University with an IQ of 210. Or Terence Tao, professor of mathematics at UCLA with an IQ of 220. And take a look at Philip Emeagwali, who has an IQ of 190. But when we compare this to some of the greatest men who ever lived, Steve Jobs, for example, is one of the most definitive figures of the last 50 to 100 years. His IQ was lower than 150. We can talk about other people like Albert Einstein didn't even have an IQ that was higher than 180. Isaac Newton, of course, had an IQ of 190, but there are several people. Elon Musk, if you do a test of his IQ, you'll find out that he doesn't even have the IQ of some of those great geniuses I spoke about, like Terence Tao, Christopher Hirata, and William J. Sidis. So how important is it to have a high IQ, or is the definitive factor in success in life a high IQ? My answer to that is a definitive no. And why do I say so? I say so because beyond IQ, I think more important than IQ is EQ. A lot of us have established that and agree with that. But more than EQ, I think there are two other quotients that are very necessary. One, I call it RQ, quotient for relentlessness. And then the other one is CQ, your quotient for creativity. You see, you can be academically smart. You could be a genius academically, and yet you don't have the kind of results, you don't have the kind of impact to society that other people with lower IQ had. So I think success in life is a combination of four quotients: IQ, EQ, CQ, creativity quotient, and then finally relentless quotient. If you combine all those four qualities, you'll find out that you are not only a blessing to yourself, but you are a blessing to humanity in general. Let's not forget that people like John Sununu, former special advisor to George H.W. Bush, was the smartest in the George W. Bush administration. But if you look at the top 5 politicians in American history in the last 50 to 100 years, Sununu will not make the cut, and yet he was the smartest of them all academically. I can give you examples upon examples, but the essence of this message I'm trying to pass across is that success in life is a combination of intelligence, creativity, relentlessness, and emotional intelligence. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. A moron and a genius have the same number of brain cells. That's the beauty of life. All human beings have 100 billion brain cells, or neurons as they are called. So then, what makes a genius smarter than a moron? It cannot be the number of brain cells, definitely. It's more like, or more of, the number of neural pathways. I believe that a genius has been able to form more neural pathways than a moron or somebody who is averagely intelligent. So let's take two confectioners or two chefs, for example. They could go to the same catering school and learn how to make shawarma, for example. But what makes a genius is that a genius says, okay, I have learned how to make shawarma with this recipe. I am now going to try other combinations, while the average person just remains the same. So a genius says, I am going to try to make shawarma with carrots instead of cabbage. I'm going to try to make it with cucumbers. I'm going to try to make it with so many other leafy greens. I'm going to try to make it with broccoli. A genius says, I'm going to try many more combinations. Now, the more he tries more combinations, the more neural pathways are formed. In fact, a genius could say, I'm going to use cabbage, but experiment. I'm going to try more combinations with the amount of cabbage relative to maybe chicken or beef. Or I'm going to try to experiment and try more combinations with the combination of ingredients. So the more combinations he tries, guess what? The more neural pathways he's forming. And that's how geniuses become geniuses. They are willing to try more combination of things. They are willing to do more in terms of how many trials they can perform, and that's what makes a genius a genius. A genius neurosurgeon, take Ben Carson for example. You remember what Ben Carson said? Ben Carson said that on the average, neurosurgeons in America perform 170 operations every year, but I perform 250. So he did 80 more surgeries than the average neurosurgeon, and that was how he was able to solve complex problems and perform groundbreaking operations, because he had seen more, he had tried more, he had done more. So becoming a ingenious. It's not rocket science. It's just applying some of these principles and forming more neural pathways so that when others get stuck, you have more inroads, meant cognitive inroads, and you know how to navigate complex problems. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to talk about the power of the female brain. The female brain is so unique that I'm so excited to share this with the whole world. Now, I want to talk about the different areas. The first area is with the hippocampus of the female brain. The hippocampus is the memory center of the brain. A woman's hippocampus is slightly larger than a man's hippocampus, and so women have the capacity to remember more, even though that includes both positive and negative memories. But women have the capacity to remember more. And in case you think that to what extent, to what advantage is it if a person can remember more? So I'll just pose two questions to you. Which will you prefer? A lawyer who remembered all your details offhand, or a lawyer who does not? Or who do you prefer? A doctor who remembers all your details offhand, or a doctor who does not? And don't forget that memory consolidation is directly related to creativity, is directly related to proactivity and high willpower, and is directly related to stronger cognitive functions. That's the first thing. The second area where a woman's brain is unique is in the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the multitasking or task switching center of the brain. A woman's corpus callosum is thicker than a man's corpus callosum, so women can switch tasks or engage in different tasks, multiple tasks at the same time. Let's talk about the third one. The third area is in the anterior cingulate cortex. It's the part of the brain responsible for weighing options. So women have the capacity to weigh more options than men. A man can go to a grocery store wanting to buy detergent and he just looks at one or two options. A woman will go to the same store and look at maybe 6 or 7 options in trying to form a decision. And it has been proven by behavioral scientists that the more options you can weigh, the better decisions you can take. And so that is an edge that the female brain has. Now, the fourth area where I would like to talk about the uniqueness of a woman's brain is that women have an ability to even think when they are stressed. When a man is stressed, blood flow to his brain stops. When a woman is stressed, blood flow to her brain is even faster. Can you beat that? Now, one more area. A woman's hypothalamus is smaller than a man's hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the part of the brain responsible for hunger and satiation. And so women do not eat as much as men. And men have a larger appetite because their hypothalamus is bigger. So, which means that women can engage more in fasting than men. And fasting, of course, is the 8th wonder of the world as regards health, because when you are fasting, you are detoxifying your body. Don't forget that Yoshinuro Oshumi, the Nobel Prize winner in 2016-2017 in medicine, created or came up with that theory of autophagy, showing that when we engage in prolonged fasting, our body cells begin to recreate themselves. That's an edge for women because it means that women have an advantage or can engage in fasting more easily than men can. So those are the advantages of the female brain. Now, the next question is, if women have so unique a brain, why is it that some of them are not optimizing that potential? And the answer is this. Now, as powerful a brain as women have, they are wired to feel before they think. They are wired to feel before they think. Now, but until they think, they can't optimize the power of their brain. So even though they have major strengths in many areas, there's also major Achilles heel in that they feel before they think. So once a woman can discipline and control herself to go past feeling and think, then they explore that feminine power of the brain that they have. I want to round up this video by just sharing two things. I was in a meeting with Richard, of course, way before he passed, and he said that he was a student of Harvard Business School in the 50s. And in the 50s, Harvard Business School had no women at all. No women. All the students were men. And he says, fast forward to today, 40% of the students in Harvard Business School are women. However, they contribute to 60% of the best performing students. So they make up only 40%, but 60% of the best performing students are women, and to the power of women. Are you a woman watching this video right now? Be grateful for the kind of brain you have and make sure that you don't lose it, but you use it. Secondly, if you are a man watching this video, begin to respect women more than you ever did. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. One of of the most powerful tenets on habit formation I have ever heard is this: every habit is sour at the start, messy at the middle, but easy at the end. Sour at the start, messy at the middle, and easy at the end. And it has helped me when I was memorizing 14 books of the Bible. I understood this principle and it helped me to achieve or attain that feat. Now, I will start by just speaking those verses or reading it out loud to myself until my memory could consolidate it. At the beginning, it was difficult and even boring, but it was sour at the start. Yes, as I continued, it was a little messy in the middle, but later it was easy at the end. If you understood this principle in trying to form any habit, it will give you more consistency, it will give you more drive, more willpower, it will give you more resilience in forming a habit. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I have studied over 1,000 biographies, and I have come to a conclusion that the 3 best names that any human being can ever have will be John, Michael, and Daniel. Now, let's start with John. Why do I say that? The greatest university of all time, Harvard University, is named after John Harvard. The greatest hospital of all time is named after a John Hopkins. The greatest billionaire of all time was John Rockefeller. The greatest banker of all time was John Pierpont Morgan, and I can go on and on. Let's go to Michael. The greatest entertainer of all time was a Michael Jackson. The greatest basketballer of all time was a Michael Jordan. The greatest Formula 1 driver of all time was a Michael Schumacher. The father of electricity was a Michael Faraday, and I could go on and on. Then let's go to Daniel. I noticed that as I began to study very wide, especially into esoteric areas, that the thought leaders of those areas were Daniels. So the father of emotional intelligence is Daniel Goleman. One of the greatest memory grandmasters of all time is a Daniel Kilov. Then one of the greatest neuroscientists of all time is a Daniel Siegel. He wrote the great book The Teenage Brain and so many other great books. And one of the greatest critical thinkers of all time, Nobel Prize winner, is a Daniel Kahneman. He was professor at Princeton University. I've seen that many thought leaders were named Daniel. I mean, one of the greatest social behavioral scientists in the world is Daniel Ariely, and so on and so forth. So I have come to a conclusion that the 3 best names anybody could bear, there are other great ones. There's William, there's George, and all that. But the 3 best names will be Michael, Daniel, and John. Now, are you pregnant or expecting a child? I advise you that you should consider one of those 3 names. If it's a girl, you can even change it from Michael to Michelle or Daniela or Joanne. But please consider it, because names are very powerful, and you may also want to reward me for this by writing a check for me and make sure it clears. Have a great day. Bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these 3, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. I want to talk about 5 of the best quotes I have ever heard. 5 of the best quotes I have ever heard. The first one was one made by Charles Capps. He says, God told me that I have told my people that they can have what they say, but they are saying what they have. Wow, that quote has not left me since I heard it over 10 years ago. It has not left me for one day, because it just showed me the power of words. I have told my people they can have what they say, but they are saying what they have. One of the most phenomenal I have ever heard. The second one is one that was made by Albert Einstein, and he said that energy is neither created or destroyed, it's only transferred or transformed. Energy is never created or destroyed, it's only transferred or transformed. And it made me understand that anger is energy. I can't create or destroy it, but I can transfer it or transform it from negative anger to holy anger. I can transfer sexual energy to something else, to maybe creative energy, and it has helped me a great deal in my life. Now, the third quote that really changed my life was one that I coined myself after thinking voraciously over a period of time, and it says that obstacles are obstacles on the surface or at surface thinking, but obstacles are opportunities in critical and deep thinking. I'll take it again. Obstacles are obstacles at surface thinking. So when you are thinking at the surface, obstacles appear as obstacles, but when you go into deep and critical thinking, obstacles become opportunities. I'll give you this example. One of my favorite CEOs is a man called Edward Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines. At a certain time, the aviation industry was struck with high aviation fuel prices and it affected their profits. And this man is a deep thinker and somebody who understands that no crisis should ever go to waste. After thinking for a while, he decided that we are going to have our own refinery, and he was able to convert an obstacle into an opportunity. Fourth quote is this. It was made by one of my favorite pastors, Pastor Ayo Otuyalo, and he said, "The universe responds to the highest bidder." And when I studied the scriptures, I discovered that this is entirely true. The universe responds to the highest bidder. I have seen witches kill Christians and eat them up for breakfast. I have seen it happen in the reverse. I have seen people who were not favored by the public win in the battles of life, because it is not about who is most popular. It is about the universe responding to the highest bidder. What that means is that if you can pay the price, the sufficient price spiritually, forget about every other thing. Every other thing will work in place. So that's the fourth most powerful quote I have ever heard. Now, the final one is this. It was a quote, two of them combined in one. I first heard from one of my favorite pastors as well, Reverend Sam Adekanmi, and he says that you attract your predominant thoughts. So whatever you think of predominantly is what you attract. So let me put it in this way. You don't attract what you think of. There is no poor person who has never thought of being rich. There is no successful person who has never thought of failing in one way or the other. But you attract what you predominantly think of. I'll take it again. You don't attract what you think of. You attract what you predominantly think of. So if you are predominantly thinking about success, you will eventually succeed. If you are predominantly thinking about failure, you will eventually fail. The second thing he said is that if it spends sufficient time in your conscious mind, it will sink into your subconscious mind. And once you understand how the subconscious works and how the subconscious determines what happens in the life of anybody, you will understand how this works and how important this is, that if you keep on thinking about a thing consciously, then it will sink into your subconscious mind. The sixth, I want to add a bonus quote. It was made by Les Brown. Les Brown says, "You don't attract what you want in life, you attract who you are." So if you find yourself attracting certain things in your life, just say to yourself that I need to work on myself. If you are attracting a lot of mediocrity or mediocre people to you, you need to tell yourself that what is it in me that is mediocre, that is attracting mediocre people to me? But it's a powerful quote. You don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day. Bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. I want to show you how people go from tension to hypertension, or from average creativity to super creativity. Now, the brain produces 10,000 stem cells every day. What is a stem cell? A stem cell is a cell that produces other cells. So the brain produces 10,000 stem cells every day. Now, 5,000 of those cells go to the part of the brain that is most dominant, while the other 5,000 produce the 10,000 for the next day. Now, a woman spends most of the day in anxiety mode or worrying about how to pay the school fees of her child. She spends most of the day anxious. So which means that the most dominant part of her brain will be the worry center, which is called the amygdala. What will happen is that because she spends most of the time worrying, 5,000 stem cells will go to the worrying center of her brain, the amygdala, and will make her amygdala larger. So the next day she'll find out that she's worrying more with automaticity or effortlessly. She's just spontaneously worrying more, finds herself worrying more. And that's how people go from tension to hypertension. This is how people go from average creativity to super creativity. Now, imagine if you spend most of your day being creative. What will happen is that 5,000 stem cells will go to the creative center of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, and will make you become more creative over time. That is how creative people become yet more creative. That is how writers become greater writers. So if you spend most of your day writing or reasoning or troubleshooting, brainstorming, and you feed your prefrontal cortex, 5,000 stem cells will go to your prefrontal cortex, make it larger, and you find out that you are thinking deeper, or you have a greater propensity to troubleshoot or to brainstorm. The same thing occurs for people who are memory grandmasters. They spend most of their day trying to consolidate memory, and then the day after, their memory center is larger, and so on and so forth. The same thing works with people who go from having an average appetite to a large appetite. When you spend most of your day maybe eating or thinking about food, the next day your hypothalamus will become larger, and you find yourself a stronger appetite for food, and so on and so forth. And that is how you can increase the capacity potential of your brain. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. I want to talk about how silence affects the brain, or how noise also affects the brain. Now, when you go to a nightclub and the volume is above 170 decibels, maybe 190, 210, 220, 230, what happens is that mental and physical reaction time slows down as volume goes louder. Now, what happens at those seasons is that when the volume goes louder, it has been noticed that irrational decisions increase. People consume more alcohol, people engage in more irrational actions, because as volume increases, cognitive function slows down and then irrationality increases. So if you want to enhance your cognitive capacity, you must appreciate being more in quiet places than being more in loud places. The Bible says that the words of the quiet are heard more than the cry of him that rules among fools. The words of the quiet are heard more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. I hope this works for you, and I hope you will embrace more of quiet environments. But to prove this, I would like to ask you a question. When you wanted to make the most important decisions of your life, did you gravitate towards quiet places or towards noisy places? I think that's a food for thought. You have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. I want to talk about a principle that can increase a person's desire or appetite for reading, especially when people have reading fatigue. So it goes like this. If you have a book to read, do you know that if you read the first paragraph of the book and the last paragraph of the book, and you read the first sentence in every other paragraph, so the first paragraph of the book, last paragraph, and then the first sentence in every other paragraph, you have a fair idea of what the book is about, and you can use that to ignite your passion or your alacrity to read that book. So that's a principle that you want to learn as regards how to increase your passion and alacrity to read. The second thing I want to talk about is that when you have a book before you and it seems daunting, let me even take a book from my library and show you. So let's assume you want to read this book, and this book is a book that has well over 1,500 pages. What that means is that you can begin to look for certain things, and I learned this principle from Howard Berg. Howard Berg is the fastest reader alive according to the Guinness Book of World Records. He says look for bold words to start with, then look for italicized words, then look for charts, look for maps, look for diagrams, and after you do so, look for figures. Just be scanning and skimming. Then look for numbers, then look for names of people and places, names of people and places. If you do so, you will have a fair idea what the book is about, and you will increase your alacrity for the book. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. I want to talk about how repetition inspires innovation. So the brain is divided into the logical brain and the creative brain. The logical brain controls verbal, reasoning, and analytical function, while the creative brain controls emotion, intuition, and creativity function. So those are the two sides of the brain, or two compartments of the brain. Now, guess what? When you engage in repetition, the creativity part of the brain becomes more dominant, and the logic or analytical part of the brain gives way, becomes less dominant, and gives way for the creativity part of the brain. So how can you engage in repetition? 4 ways. I have an acronym I call VARM. You can take a mantra or a quote and say it repeatedly. So that's V. Then A, affirmation. So you can take an affirmation and repeat it over time. In repeating the affirmation over time, you are going to activate your creative brain, and then you find yourself becoming more creative. The R stands for routine. If you do certain things at certain times, you wake up at the same time, go to work at the same time, go to jog at the same time, go to eat at the same time, go to bed at the same time, your body's circadian rhythm will come in tune with that routine, and it will get you in a creative mood. The third thing you can do is through movement. When you exercise, any kind of exercise at all, whether it's swimming, walking, jogging, bench pressing, high intensity interval training, as you do so, you will find out that because you are engaging in repetitive movements, what will happen is that you will activate your creative brain. It will become more dominant. Your logical brain will become less dominant, and you'll find yourself becoming creative. So that is how repetition fuels creativity. But I want to leave you with this. There were 4 iconic men who tied their creativity to movement. Mark Twain said, "I walked and thought." Goethe said, "I paced and dictated." Mozart composed in the back of a carriage, and then Goethe composed on horseback. So the common denominator between those 4 people was movement. When you move, you are activating your creative brain. So you may want to take a walk. I've practiced it in my personal life. I have learned that every time I take a walk, I come up with my best ideas. It could be an insight, it could be a principle, it could be a topic of research, it could be a way to get things better done. It could even be a song or a lyric that I come up with. But most of them come during my times exercising, moving, or taking a walk. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these 3, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. One of the best ways to have a very productive life is to understand that every disadvantage carries an inherent advantage, just like every advantage carries an inherent disadvantage. Now, I will share some examples with you. I have studied so many biographies, maybe over 1,000 of them, and I have come to a conclusion that behind people with great strengths were people that were able to convert some great weaknesses into those great strengths. So R. Kelly is arguably the greatest R&B singer and performer of all time, and he's known as the king of R&B, the Pied Piper. But a little will you know, this man who has written for everybody from Celine Dion to Michael Jackson, also has an impediment in reading and writing. So R. Kelly doesn't read well, he doesn't write well. But I believe that why he has been able to write so many iconic songs is that his inability to read well and write well compels him to visualize and to read and write in his brain, and that's why he could come up with songs like "Move Your Body Like a Snake, Ma," or "Baby Turn Around and Let Me See That Body Go Bum Bum Bum," or it's the remix to Ignition, and compare intercourse to putting a key into the ignition of a car, and so on and so forth. So that's one way that you can see a person's disadvantage play out to an advantage. The second area is with Albert Einstein, arguably the greatest genius who ever lived. Do you know that Albert Einstein never spoke a word until he was 3 years old? So for the first 3 years, he could not speak. Now, you will think that that's a disadvantage. Maybe the child has a medical problem or something, but I believe that because I have understood and studied the connection between excessive talking and shallow thinking, the fact that he did not say too much in his first 3 years gave him the ability to be very introspective and be a person of deep thought. When Albert Einstein died sometime in 1965 at Princeton University, the pathologist Thomas Harvey chopped up his brain to examine it, and he was discovered that the connection between his parietal lobe, prefrontal cortex, and corpus callosum were very thick, very, very strong. I believe that it was because he was a very deep thinker, and I believe that there was a strong connection between him not being able to speak for the first 3 years, which compelled him to do more of thinking than talking from a young age, that eventually culminated in the greatness of Albert Einstein. So in every disadvantage you will find advantages, and in every advantage you will also find disadvantages. The final example I will give is with the greatest Olympian of all time, Michael Phelps, with about 28 Olympic medals. Now, he said he saw, in quotes, disadvantage with his bodily frame. His upper body appears longer than what it should be compared to the ratio between a person's upper body and lower body. So he did not have the body of certain athletes, or a body that was suited for certain sports like maybe American football or basketball. But he says that he later discovered that his body was perfectly suited for swimming. So when you appear to have a disadvantage in an area, it may actually be that it's a disadvantage in a certain context, but could be an advantage in an entirely different landscape. I want to share more examples. Okay, so if you notice, the 3 greatest football players of all time, Edson Arantes do Nascimento, otherwise known as Pele, Diego Maradona, and Lionel Messi, are all short, diminutive players. None of them is even anywhere near 6 feet. Now, you will see being short as a disadvantage, or some people will say being short is a disadvantage. Of course, it may be a disadvantage advantage for certain people, but for football players, the more diminutive they were in certain respects, the more they were able to accomplish their greatness. That diminutive stature gave them the ability to do things in certain ways. Being a football journalist for about 10 years, I discovered that one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time, Jose Luis Chilavert, said something. He said this was not a short man. He was a man that was over 6 feet tall, but he says my feet were very small. Now, Jose Luis Chilavert was a goalkeeper who could take free kicks and score. He could take penalties and score. He was known for that. But he says that while he was able to do so was because his feet were unusually small. So life is not about advantage and disadvantage. It's about finding advantage in disadvantage and being careful to know that even in advantage lies disadvantage. I would share 2 more examples. Do you know that when a person is 7 feet tall, they have a 65% chance of dying even before they get to the age of 70, especially dying of heart-related problems? Guess what? Go and Google all the tallest men who ever lived. They never lived to be 60. Most of them never lived to be 60. So you can see that being tall to many people is seen as an advantage, but you can see the inherent disadvantage in that. So one more time, in every disadvantage is an inherent advantage, and in every advantage is an inherent disadvantage. It's all about us being careful to find the advantages and then using it to our best abilities. So have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these 3, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. The human brain is divided into 3 layers. The first layer controls functions like breathing, circulation, and digestion. It's called the reptilian brain. And then you have the second layer, which is called the mammalian brain. It's the feeling brain, where you show and express emotions. And then you have the third layer, which is what separates human brains from animals. It's the thinking brain, where you have the prefrontal cortex. Now, most of the most powerful discoveries I have made concerning the brain is that the feeling brain and thinking brain work in inverse proportions, or they have an inverse relationship with each other, such that when the thinking brain comes alive, the feeling brain shuts down, and vice versa. I'll take that again. When the thinking brain comes alive, the feeling brain shuts down. But what happens is that when your feeling brain comes alive, your thinking brain shuts down. When your feeling brain comes alive, your thinking brain shuts down. However, for you to understand it clearly, the feeling brain controls predominantly negative emotions, while your thinking brain controls not just your cognitive functions but also your positive emotions. I'll take that again. The feeling brain controls predominantly negative emotions, but the thinking brain controls not only cognitive functions but also positive emotions. Now, to prove that to you, I'll show you this. Have you noticed that when people get angry, which is a negative emotion, the thinking brain shuts down? To prove to you that when the feeling brain comes alive, the thinking brain shuts down. So a man was in an altercation with his best friend. He got angry and he punched his best friend, and his best friend died, and today he's serving a life sentence. Now, when his anger was aroused, his thinking brain shut down and he took a very regrettable decision. So when the feeling brain comes alive, the thinking brain shuts down. Now, I'll share some more examples. At that World Cup final where Zinedine Zidane gave the infamous headbutt to Materazzi, he was red carded and France went on to lose the final to Italy. Now, so in his anger, when a negative emotion like anger came alive, thinking shut down and he took a regrettable decision. So you will find out that every time negative emotions come alive, thinking shuts down and human beings take regrettable decisions. Why? Because the thinking brain has an inverse relationship with the feeling brain. When the feeling brain comes alive, the thinking brain shuts down, and when the thinking brain comes alive, the feeling brain shuts down. So that's the way it works. Now, let me prove it with other emotions. Boris Becker is a German tennis legend, won Wimbledon 3 times, and he says the worst decision I took in my life was impregnating Angela Imakova in a London restaurant. No boom. Now, guess what? In a London restaurant, he had sex with Russian model Angela Imakova, and he said it was the worst decision of his life. What happened was that there was an arousal, horniness, negative emotions came alive, and then he says, I took a regrettable decision, because when negative emotions come alive, the thinking brain shuts down, and that's where poor decisions are taken. I'll give you another example. Fear is a negative emotion. When people are afraid, they take regrettable decisions as well. So I know of doctors who were afraid and they couldn't even administer injections, simple injections, because when the negative or when the feeling brain comes alive, even the cognitive brain shuts down. I'll give you another example. I was training a celebrity artist, or an artist, R&B artist, and I was telling her about about this and she said, it's exactly true. What you're saying is true. Why? She said she was going to perform the national anthem before an audience and she said she was afraid and she forgot the national anthem. Why? When the feeling brain, negative emotions come alive, the thinking brain shuts down. So fear is a negative emotion. She was afraid and then she forgot the national anthem. That's how it works. Now, I'm going to corroborate this with another statement I want to make, or to advance this train of thought with another statement, and that is this: the deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotions. I'll take it again. The deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotions. So one of the ways to attain emotional intelligence that we have not been told about by so many AI experts is that we should deliberately aim to deepen our thoughts, to think deeply, critically, to go and invest in a lot of critical reading, research, thinking, because the deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotions. Now, this explains why it's easier for a Nobel Prize winner to control his anger than a street thug. This explains why you see more street thugs losing their tempers and engaging or being caught in crimes than you would see university professors or Nobel Prize winners or Pulitzer Prize winners, because the deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotions. Do you hope to control your emotions? One of the most definitive things I think you can do is to deliberately decide that I'm going to deepen my thoughts. How? I'm going to spend more time in silence thinking. I'm going to spend more time researching, reading, reasoning, writing, and by doing so, I will deepen my thoughts and have more control over my emotions. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day. Bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. Now, one of the greatest principles on emotional control I have discovered is that the deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotions. I'll repeat, the deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotion. Now, in a previous video, I showed you the inverse relationship between the thinking brain and the feeling brain, between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. So you can watch that. But listen to this. The deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotion. When you begin to think deeper, you'll find out that you can control your emotions better. This explains why it's easier for Nobel Prize winners to control their emotions than street thugs. Now, you will see street thugs lose their temper easily than you will see a Nobel Prize winner. Just go to correctional centers and find out the demographic of the majority of inmates in correctional centers or prisons. You'll find out that there are people who have spent less time in deep thinking than those who have spent more time in deep thinking. The deeper your thoughts, the more control you have over your emotion. And so I would like to give this advice to people who want to attain a high level of emotional control and mastery, that one of the best things you can do is to deliberately decide that I am going to deepen my thoughts. I'm going to deepen my thoughts. I'm going to make sure that I'm spending more time reading critically, thinking critically, researching critically. I am going to spend more time in silence and solitude and in deep thoughts. As you do so and your thoughts go deeper, you will have more control over your emotions. Why? Because the thinking brain has an inverse relationship with the feeling brain, and as one gets stronger, the other comes more in control of the other. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. Okay, what are my prescriptions for self-communication? Very simple. You can start by spending time to be alone and then building that habit to a point where you can spend time with yourself, being silent and communing with your own self. During that time, you could even read a book, you could watch a documentary or something, you can engage in any cognitive exercise. Then I think you can plateau that practice with spending days alone where you're just communing with yourself. When you go on a retreat and you are just communing with yourself for days. Remember J.K. Rowling, when she was going to work on one of the editions of Harry Potter, you know what she said? She said, I wasn't getting inspired. And what did she do? She said, I went to a hotel in Edinburgh, locked myself up, and I was alone. And then the inspiration came back. When we spend time, sufficient prolonged hours alone, we come to a place of clarity, a place of solutions. The human being is a self-knowing being. I'll say it again. The human being is a self-knowing being. We have the ability to know things intuitively. Hippocrates was the father of medicine. Who taught him medicine? He knew it by himself. The Wright brothers invented the airplane. Who taught them? They knew it by themselves. The human being is a self-knowing being. But we can only activate that potential when we spend sufficient time in self-communication where clarity can come to the fore. So have you gone in a 1 month retreat just being alone? I prescribe that to you, that go on a 1 month retreat. If you can't do 1 month, do 2 weeks. If you can't do 2 weeks, do 1 week. If you can't do 1 week, do a day. But build it as an ethic and have a goal that within a number of years, I will be able to spend a month alone, 1 month alone. You will see that you will activate the super potential in you to know yourself, to master yourself, and to come up with earth-shattering solutions. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these 3, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. Life is a trifecta of pleasure, pain, and passion. And how motivated you are as an individual is a function of the interplay of pleasure, pain, and passion in your life. I'll explain. Now, for the purposes of this video, pleasure refers to every negative or destructive excitement. Negative or destructive excitement, while passion refers to any constructive or positive excitement. I'll explain. For example, cocaine is called a pleasure drug. It makes people high or gives people a good feeling, in quotes, or gets people high, but it destroys brain cells or it weakens the brain. So for that reason, it is a pleasure because it gives negative or destructive excitement. Now, exercise on the other hand is good for the health, good for the body. It leads to the production of endorphins that is good for metabolism and the health in general. So exercise in this context will be a passion and not pleasure. It's constructive and not destructive. So when I say life is a trifecta of pleasure, pain, and passion, please understand that in this context, pleasure is negative excitement while passion is positive excitement, and we all know what pain is. Now, guess what? In life, as pleasure increases, passion decreases, and vice versa. That will mean that as pleasure increases, passion decreases. Listen to me. When Tiger Woods' pleasure for women went up, his passion for golf went down. Hello? In life, you cannot have pleasure and passion at the same time. That is, at utmost levels. You cannot have both pleasure and passion at peak levels. No, one will have to sacrifice or give way for the other. So, I'll give you more examples. Whitney Houston, at the height of her cocaine addiction, her passion for music plummeted. You can't have passion and pleasure at the same time, and that's why many human beings struggle with motivation, because pleasure doors have been opened. A lot of pleasure doors have been opened. So I've given you the example of Tiger Woods, Whitney Houston. I can give you an avalanche of more examples of people who have sacrificed passion for pleasure and vice versa. Now, I'll give you another example. Kobe Bryant was one of the most motivated basketballers of all time. Earlier on in his basketballing career, he stopped clubbing altogether, and no clubbing at all. No clubbing at all. And that was why he was very passionate, very driven as a basketballer, because he shut the pleasure doors. I'll give you another example. One of the most disciplined personalities and athletes in our generation is Cristiano Ronaldo. He's somebody who stays away from many unhealthy foods. Those are pleasure foods that make you feel good. Who would not like a bowl of ice cream? Who would not like carbonated soft drinks? But he stays away from those things. Those things excite, but they are bad for the body. It is pleasure. He stays away from those things, and little or no wonder that his passion is very strong. So I want to ask you today, how motivated are you? How motivated are you? If you are struggling with motivation, do an inventory of your life. You will find out that there are many pleasure doors that have been opened. Now, what is the solution to this? The solution to this is that when pleasure doors are open, they will bring pain into your life. So for example, if a child decides not to read and decides that I'm not going to read, I'm going to watch Netflix and chill all day, that pleasure you have given to will invite the pain of academic failure. But guess what? If you are not growing in passion, it's because your response to pain is wrong. I'll take it again. If you are not growing in passion, it's because your response to pain is wrong. Now, as you begin to respond positively to pain, you will find out that when you respond positively to pain, it will feed your passion. So a child that says, okay, I failed, I'm going to respond positively to this, it will ignite a passion. When we spend money recklessly and we become bankrupt, that pain of bankruptcy ignites a passion for financial prudence. Can you see how pain and a good response to pain can ignite passion? Good. So whenever you are in pain in life, if you have a good response to pain, you will ignite passion. Whenever painful things happen, always be grateful for it. Always be grateful. It will open passion doors for you. Whenever anything negative happens in life, always be grateful for it. It will open passion doors. I hope this works well for you. Do have an amazing day. Bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these 3, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. I have a passion to study Fortune 500 companies, the biggest corporations in the world. And over 20 years, I have studied some of these biggest corporations. And the fruit of it is that I have developed a model on how individuals become institutions. How individuals become institutions. Now, please listen to this. In every industry, about 4 firms control a bulk of the industry. The music industry is controlled by about 4 companies. So you have Universal, BMG, Interscope, and one other company. In the film industry, you have Paramount Pictures, you have Disney, you have 21st Century Fox, and one other company, DreamWorks. In the banking sector, you have about 4 companies, 4 banks that control the bulk of that industry. The same thing applies in the cosmetics industry. The same thing applies in the pharmaceutical industry. You have the Pfizer's, AstraZeneca's, the Roche's, and the Novo Nordisk. The same thing applies in the fashion industry. The same thing applies in the food industry. Nestle, Monsanto, Mondelez, Kraft Heinz. This is a common thread in industry. Now, I have studied all these industries from the beginning, from scratch to finish, and I have seen how individuals become institutions. Now, I want to do a retrospective journey. I want to take you on a retrospective journey on how individuals become institutions. It's just a product of research that I have done over the years on how individuals become institutions. If you would like to be part of this class, please let me know. You can call the number on the screen or send me a DM and we'll reach you. I look forward to having you in this unforgettable experience. Do have an amazing day and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these 3, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM and we'll reach out to you. So there are 6 stages of life, and the first stage is between the ages of 0 and 6. That's the early childhood. Now, at this stage, I call it the stage of impressionability, curiosity, and creativity. At that stage, children are highly impressionable. They learn things, they soak in things like a sponge. They are very curious, they are very creative. If you put a child in mud, the child will play with the mud. Any object, they are in a creative phase of life. But at that stage, a child can learn 3 languages at the same time because they are in the impressionability stage of life. That's where the subconscious is essentially formed. That's the impressionability stage of life. That's the first stage. Now, if a child has a solid foundation at that stage, when the child gets to the next stage of life, which is the logic and analysis stage of life, you'll find out that the child has a strong ability to reason, to perform logical and analytical functions because the foundation was strong. So the second phase between the ages of 7 and 12 is the next phase, the logic and analysis phase. Now, at this phase, children ask a lot of questions. They want to rationalize a lot of things because at this stage, they are building up. Now, I told you something that in the previous stage, children can learn 3 languages at the same time. When a child gets to the age of 7, to learn 1 language becomes difficult. Why? Because the child is no longer in the delta theta wave of life. He's now in the alpha beta phase of life. As a child, he was in the delta theta phase, and in that phase, children sleep a lot. They sleep a lot. That's why they can soak in things like a sponge. Now, in alpha beta phase, they don't find themselves sleeping that much, but they're in the logical phase of life. And the beauty of life is that even if you're an adult, at a certain window in your life every day, you get into the delta phase of life where you can reprogram your subconscious. The first 20 minutes to 2 hours when you wake up, you're in the delta theta phase of life. You can reprogram your subconscious. You can soak in things like a sponge. Whatever you decide to focus on has a strong impact on the rest of your day and your subconscious. Now, so this is the second phase of life between the ages of 7 and 12, where you are doing a lot of rationalizing, analyzing things. Then, which ushers people into the third phase of life. That's the teenage phase between the ages of 13 and 19. Now, if the person's foundation at the logic phase of life is very strong, when the child gets to the teenage phase of life, you'll find out that he's able to flourish at that phase of life. But what's that phase of life? It starts really at the hypothalamus, where a protein called kisspeptin is released. It triggers a gland in the body called the pituitary gland, and 3 hormones are released: progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. Now, teenagers begin to seek emotive experiences. So I call that phase of life the emotive phase of life. The emotive phase of life. Now, teenagers begin to gravitate to loud music, loud clothes, loud friends, loud habits, protected or unprotected sex, and drifting more away from their parents to their peers and so on and so forth. However, if a child has a very good foundation between the ages of 7 to 12, when the child gets to the emotive phase of life, the child will not be overwhelmed by their emotions. They will be able to control their emotions. But if the foundation was faulty, you will find out that that teenager will be overwhelmed and swept away by their emotion in the emotive phase of life. Which leads me to stage 4, the 4th stage of life, when you're in your 20s. That is the stage where you are discovering who you really are. That's the stage where most icons discovered who they are. Whether it was the Bill Gates, whether it was the Steve Jobs, whether it was the Martin Luther Kings, whether it was the Adolf Hitlers, they all discovered who they are in that phase of life. It's the stage of self-discovery, that decade between the ages of 20 and 29. Now, guess what? If your previous stage was very solid, the teenage phase, you'll find out that you are flourishing in that phase. But if the previous stage was very weak, the emotive stage was weak, it may affect a person's ability to optimize that phase of self-discovery. And that's why some people, even after 20s, even after they're in their 30s, they can't even really discover who they really are. Now, this leads us to the fifth stage of life in your 30s, between the ages of 30 and 39. In this stage, you are establishing yourself. You are no longer just discovering, you are now establishing yourself. So you are telling the whole world that this is who I am and I'm here to stay. And in that age, that was when Bill Gates became a billionaire. That was when a lot of the icons really established themselves. In his 30s, Martin Luther King became a household name in America. He eventually was assassinated at the age of 39. In his 30s, Malcolm X became a household name in America. He eventually was assassinated at the age of 39. In his 30s, Bob Marley became a global icon. He eventually died in his 30s. So that's where you establish yourself and spread your wings to the rest of the world. Now, that leads us to the next stage of life when you're in your 40s. That is the stage where you are consolidating. So you go from an individual to an institution. You go from a star to becoming an icon, and so on and so forth. That's the first stage of. However, if your foundation is faulty, that is, the previous stage was weak, you find out that where you should be consolidating and establishing yourself from an individual to an icon, you have troubles doing so because the foundation was faulty. So every phase in your life determines what will happen in the next phase. Every phase determines what will happen in the next phase. Now, that's what happens in your 40s. In your 40s, you consolidate. Now, in your 50s is your decade of replication. This is where you are mentoring people and you are now pouring yourself into people. So a Peter Thiel mentors an Elon Musk. A Galileo Galilei mentors an Isaac Newton. A Benjamin Graham mentors a Warren Buffett, where you are replicating yourself into others. Now, what about the other phases of life? The other phases of life, or the years after your 50s, are the phase of life where I call the bonus years. So if you made mistakes in your previous years and you could not optimize those seasons, whether it was a stage of purpose discovery or establishment or replication or consolidation, in those bonus years, you can now begin to redeem those lost years. You can redeem those lost years. So these are the phases of life. And if you have an understanding of the times and the seasons, your brethren will be subject to your command. I hope this works well for you. If you have not optimized the seasons of life, don't be discouraged about it. Start to build. So whatever you could not do in a certain phase, make sure you start doing those things so that you can now begin to redeem the time, because the days are very sensitive. God bless you. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. One of the greatest mantras in branding that I have ever heard was by a lady called Denise Leon. She wrote the book, What Great Brands Do, and it goes thus. She says that great brands don't chase customers, they attract customers. It changed my life forever. I'm a Bible smith, so I went to the Bible to ascertain the veracity of that statement, and I saw that Jesus did not chase people, he attracted people. In fact, the Bible says that multitudes followed him. He appealed to people, he didn't chase people, he appealed to them. So she says that great brands don't chase customers, they appeal or attract customers, they appeal to customers. So I decided from that day onwards that I will not chase any customer, I would just appeal to them. So I will work on myself to the point that I am appealing to people and I will not chase people. What are the things you can do? Principally, first of all, you can work on your technical expertise. Make sure that you are so good at what you do. But more than that, you should also work on your soft skills, your communication skills, your branding, your marketing, your creativity skills, how you can make yourself, relevant in the society you are in. If you do so, you'll find out that you are not chasing customers, but you are appealing to customers. Now, one company that really stood out in this was Ferrari. Now, Ferrari sell only 10,000 cars every year compared to other brands like Toyota that sell about 10 million cars every year, or Volkswagen that sell 13 million cars every year. Ferrari intentionally states that they will not sell more than 10 million cars every year. Previously, the number was even 7,000. But more than that, for certain Ferraris, you cannot even buy them except you previously have owned a Ferrari. I mean, they are so particular about their brand that they do not chase customers, they attract customers. I pray for you today that you will not chase, but you will attract or appeal to people in Jesus' name. Do have an amazing day. Bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these three, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you. Now, I want to talk about how ego affects the brain, and I want to use 3 examples. You see, I told you in a previous video that when the feeling brain comes alive, that comes with negative emotions, the thinking brain shuts down. Ego is an emotion, pride, feeling, and when it comes alive, the thinking brain shuts down, and I'll show you what I mean. Give you 3 examples. First of all, is the example of Mary J. Blige. Mary J. Blige was scouted as an artist at the age of 17. Of course, she lived in the Yonkers, and she was recruited by a record company called Uptown Records. And at that age, she didn't know a lot about the music industry and how it ran as a business. But she said something. She said, I'll be at meetings, business meetings, talking about the business of my music, and I won't know a thing about what they're saying. But she said something. She said, my pride will not allow me ask questions. So can you see that pride limits ability to optimize your cognition or your cognitive abilities? Because of pride, she refused to ask questions and she did not learn. That's one. The second example I'll give is the example of Boyz II Men. And Boyz II Men was the biggest music duo of the 90s, especially the early 90s. After a while, their first album sold about 9 million copies, and they had this producer called Dallas Austin. And Dallas Austin was telling this story. He said that after a while, they'll come to the studio and they won't talk about music anymore. They will just be saying, man, look at the number of diamonds on my Rolex. I can't even count it. They just became very proud. Now, guess what? Their biggest song, I'll Make Love to You, was written by Kenneth Babyface Edmonds. And guess what? The first day they heard the song, they said, we don't like the song. We're not going to record it. We can write better songs. And their record label executive said, you better record that song. And they were compelled to record it. Guess what? Eventually became their biggest hit of all time. What pride does is that when you see opportunities, because of ego and pride, you don't even notice it as opportunities. So that's how ego affects the brain. Are you being affected by your ego in any way? I pray for you that it will not become your Achilles heel. Do have an amazing day, and bye for now. I want to facilitate a class on breaking down the concepts of the Bible, not just these 3, but many more. If you're interested, please call the numbers on the screen, send me a DM, and we'll reach out to you.